I think people wanted to hear a story like that. In 1988, the decision that I made to let my husband coach me instead of my coach of so many years, over 10 years, Bob Kersey, who was Jackie's husband.
Florence Griffith Joyner, the Olympic legend who still holds world records in both the 100-meter and 200-meter dashes, died suddenly at just 38 years old. But just recently, disturbing new details have come to light, straight from her autopsy report. And let me tell you, it's raising way more questions than it answers. Grab a seat, because the deeper we go into Flo Jo's autopsy findings, the more you'll realize this story was never over. It was just covered up. Stay with me. This is going to be one of the most important stories you hear today. Autopsy confirms Florence Griffith Joyner died from seizure-induced asphyxiation. Florence Griffith Joyner, or as the world called her, Flo Jo, the fastest woman alive, that vibrant, beautiful, unstoppable force on the track. Just gone. Just like that. And for years, people were left with nothing but confusion, rumors, and whispers about what really happened. Like, how does someone who seemed to be the picture of health, someone who literally flew on the track with all that strength and grace, die in her sleep at just 38? It didn't make sense. And you know how it goes when something doesn't make sense. People start filling in the blanks with gossip, with wild guesses, and with a lot of unfair assumptions. But now, the official autopsy finally gave us the real story. And let me tell you, it's both heartbreaking and oddly peaceful at the same time. So here's what the medical experts found. And honestly, it's so sad because it all sounds so quiet, so accidental. Flo Jo died from something called positional asphyxia, which basically means she suffocated because of the way her body was positioned during an epileptic seizure. Can you believe that? It wasn't harmful substance. It wasn't heart failure. It wasn't anything scandalous, like some people tried to suggest. She simply had a seizure in her sleep. And the way her body reacted, her limbs stiffened, her head turned just the wrong way, and she ended up on her stomach, cut off her breathing, just like that. What really happened to the fastest woman on Earth? We all knew Florence Griffith Joyner for her speed, her style, and her smile, but no one expected this. New details from her autopsy are not just surprising, they're disturbing. What was hiding beneath the surface? Why are experts now asking questions all over again? Stick around to the very end, because the last revelation will absolutely stop you in your tracks. Dr. Richard Fukumoto, the chief forensic pathologist, put it in plain English. She's suffocated. And doesn't that just send a chill down your spine? Like something so small, something that could happen in such a quiet moment while you're tucked in bed. And apparently, it all happened pretty fast. We're talking minutes, not even close to an hour. Her airway was blocked, and there was congestion all over her body, especially her lungs, which had frothy fluid in them. That paints a pretty vivid picture of how her body fought, even for just a little while, to breathe. It's terrifying, but also, it just shows how fragile we all are, no matter how fast we can run or how many gold medals we've got hanging at home. Now, here's where it gets even more personal and a bit unexpected. During the deeper examination, a neuropathologist, Dr. Barbara Zayas, found something in her brain. It was this little thing called a cavernous angioma. It's basically a cluster of abnormal blood vessels, about an inch in size, that had settled in the part of her brain above her left eye, right in the zone that controls things like speech, language, and higher thinking. And here's the wild part. This thing had likely been with her since birth. It's something you're born with, and about 1 in 4 people have it. Most never even know it's there, but in Flo Jo's case, it may have been silently irritating her brain over the years, triggering those misfires that eventually became seizures. Remember when she had that seizure on a flight 2 years before she died? Yeah, that was likely a warning sign. Her family mentioned it back then, how she had to be hospitalized overnight because of it. But still, no one could figure out exactly why it happened. And let's be real, who would have thought something this serious could be hiding in the brain of an Olympic legend? What's especially important to point out here, and I mean this with all the emphasis in the world, is that no banned substances or performance enhancers were found in her system. None, just Tylenol and a bit of Benadryl. That's it. So for anyone who ever threw shade or tried to dim her light by suggesting otherwise, the science officially shuts that nonsense down. Isn't that so typical, though? A strong, successful black woman dominates a sport, and suddenly people just assume she must be cheating. It's maddening, but at least now the truth has spoken. and it's clean, it's honest, and it's tragic in the purest way. Another really heartbreaking part? This all happened while she was asleep, face down. The seizure struck silently, and because not all seizures come with those dramatic, shaking convulsions like you see in movies, no one knew. No loud warning, no flailing, just silence. Can you imagine how scary that is? How many people suffer from epilepsy and sleep alone without even knowing they're at risk for something like this? Dr. Michael Reisinger from the Stanford Epilepsy Center said it himself. This kind of outcome is incredibly rare, but rare or not, it happened. And it happened to Flo Jo. You know what's even more mind-blowing? Through all of this, through the seizures, the congenital brain condition, the stress of fame, the intense physical pressure she probably lived under, Florence still shattered records, still inspired millions, and still moved with a level of confidence and grace that no one else has quite matched. That woman didn't just run fast, she lived fast, but with a kind of poise that made you forget the world ever tried to doubt her. So now that we finally know what truly happened to her, it's like we can breathe a little easier knowing that it wasn't anything dirty or scandalous. It was just a tragic medical reality. And it really does make you want to hold your loved ones a little closer, doesn't it? Makes you realize that even the brightest flames can be snuffed out in the quietest ways. Flo Jo wasn't just an athlete. She was a wife, a mother, a trailblazer, and a fashion icon with those wild, one-legged bodysuits and bedazzled nails. And yet, in the end, she was human, just like the rest of us. Vulnerable, mortal, and deserving of truth and compassion. So yeah, now that we finally have the facts, it feels like a kind of closure. A heartbreaking one, but at least it's real. Investigators rule out foul play after initial homicide concerns. Florence Griffith Joyner, the legendary track and field queen, the woman who ran like the wind and looked like a fashion icon while doing it, passed away in the most shocking and heartbreaking way back in 1998. And for a moment there, it looked like something much darker might have happened. You know how sometimes you hear about someone dying suddenly in their sleep, and it's just so hard to wrap your head around? That was Flo Jo's case. But when the Orange County Sheriff Coroner's Office first got involved, let's just say they weren't completely buying the idea that this was just a peaceful passing. At least, not at first. So here's how everything unfolded. On the morning of September 21st, 1998, Al Joyner, Florence's husband, yes, the same Al Joyner, who was an Olympic gold medalist too, called 911 around 7 a.m., sounding understandably frantic. When authorities showed up at their home in Mission Viejo, they noticed right away that something was off. The house was described as very cluttered and unkept, which doesn't automatically mean foul play, of course, but it definitely raised a few eyebrows. Then they found Flo Jo lying on the carpet next to the bed, face up. Just imagine that. This vibrant, strong woman, suddenly gone, lying there in such a vulnerable state. Now here's where things start to get really intense. Dr. Richard Fukumoto, the chief forensics officer, began the autopsy that same day. And within just 30 minutes, he saw some things that made him stop everything. He was so concerned by what he found that he literally called in homicide detectives. What he saw were petechial hemorrhages, tiny blood spots caused by broken capillaries, in her eyes, her neck, her cheeks, even her chest and breasts. And then there were tardeuse spots on her chest wall, too. Now, both of those are sometimes associated with strangulation. Not always, but enough to take a pause. At that point, everyone started wondering the same thing. Was this really just a medical issue, or was something else going on? And then, of course, people started looking closely at Al Joyner. Not necessarily because there was any obvious evidence pointing to him, but because, well, who else was there that night? And as with any sudden death, especially one involving someone so famous, investigators had to dig deep. Al's timeline came under the microscope. He had first told authorities that he watched TV after Flo Jo went to bed, and then eventually went to bed himself after seeing her alive around 2 a.m. But when they pressed a little further, the story shifted. He said, actually, he went to his office that night instead, which he added wasn't unusual for him. Not unusual? That made investigators take note. Then came another piece of the puzzle. Al said he found Florence face down, with her hands kind of underneath her neck. That little detail might not seem huge, but it could explain the hemorrhaging. And later, he also mentioned that his wife had a history of seizures. She'd sometimes zone out, he said. At first, there weren't any medical records on hand to back up those claims, but eventually, they were able to confirm that she did in fact have epilepsy. So now the focus began to shift. Maybe this wasn't something sinister. Maybe it was just tragically natural. Still, just to be sure, the autopsy was exhaustive. They looked for anything, any tiny bone fracture, bruising, marks of trauma that might indicate a struggle or foul play. But there was nothing. No broken bones in her neck, no damage to the cartilage, no signs of a fight. Nothing under her fingernails. It was like her body just shut down. And then several independent pathologists reviewed everything and came to the same conclusion. There just wasn't any physical evidence that pointed to killing or assault. As dramatic as those early signs were, they didn't add up to a crime. Eventually, the coroner's office came forward with the official cause of death: natural causes. Specifically, they believed Flo Jo suffered an epileptic seizure during her sleep. What likely happened is that her body got positioned in such a way that she couldn't breathe properly, something called positional asphyxia. It's one of those terrifyingly silent killers that can happen in the middle of the night, without a sound, just like that. It's interesting, right? That someone who was literally the fastest woman in the world could be taken down by something so quiet and invisible. And the fact that there was this brief window where people actually suspected foul play, it just makes her story even more tragic and mysterious. But ultimately, there was no scandal, no hidden violence, just a deeply unfortunate, heartbreaking end to a life that had inspired millions. And you know what? It makes you think. Life is so unpredictable. One day you're winning gold medals and changing the image of what an athlete can look like. Those iconic one-legged bodysuits, that unforgettable hair, the nails, the power, the grace. And the next, you're gone in your sleep, and the world is left trying to make sense of it all. Florence Griffith Joyner was more than an athlete. She was a symbol, a living, breathing icon. And though her life ended in such a sudden and sad way, her legacy, that's still running laps around the rest of us. Florence Griffith Joyner lit up the track like no one else. But her autopsy is now shining a very different kind of spotlight. What did they find? Why are some doctors still puzzled to this day? And what does it all mean for her legacy? Trust me, you're going to want to sit tight for this one, especially for the final twist no one saw coming. Experts debate steroid use despite lack of toxicology evidence. After all these years, and even after Flo Jo's death, people still can't stop debating whether she used performance-enhancing, harmful substance? You'd think conclusive toxicology reports would be the final word, right? But no, the whispers still hang in the air like a stubborn fog that just won't lift. Let's start with the hard facts. Like, actually hard facts. Not the "my cousin's uncle heard from a guy" type of gossip. When Flo Jo passed away in 1998, her autopsy included a full toxicology report. And guess what they found in her system? Literally, just Tylenol and Benadryl. That's it. Just 2 everyday, over-the-counter meds in the kind of dosage you or I might take if we had a headache and some allergies. The forensic expert in charge, Lieutenant Frank Fitzpatrick, was very clear when he said there was nothing unusual in terms of harmful substance in her body. And to top it off, those meds were declared totally irrelevant to her cause of death. So, if we're going strictly by science, there was no sign, zero, of performance enhancers in her system when she died. And here's another thing people tend to forget. Flo Jo was tested like crazy during her career, especially during the 1988 Seoul Olympics. You remember how everyone's jaws hit the floor watching her run like she had rockets in her sneakers? Well, those performances triggered steroid rumors almost immediately. So the International Olympic Committee didn't just sit back and watch. They tested her thoroughly. Like, as Prince Alexander de Meride from the IOC said, they did all possible and imaginable tests, and she passed every single one. Clean, every time. Isn't it funny how we can be handed facts on a silver platter, and some folks still go, I don't know. But here's where things get a little sticky. Because while no steroids were found in her body at the time of her death, and while she passed all her Olympic illegal substance tests, some people keep circling back to one unsettling thing found during her autopsy: an enlarged heart and some other oversized organs. Now, if you know anything about human growth hormone, HGH, or even just follow sports dramas, you might know that certain harmful substance, especially HGH, can lead to something called acromegaly, which causes abnormal growth of organs. So of course, when people heard about those oversized organs, their minds jumped to HGH use. Like, instantly. But here's the twist, again. The medical professionals who actually did the autopsy were very, very clear. The enlarged heart wasn't considered abnormal for her. They even said her heart appeared to be normal. And as for the cavernous angioma found in her brain, which was eventually identified as the likely cause of her fatal seizure, they said it had no connection to steroids or any other harmful substances, at least according to all known medical research. So it's like, how do we balance that? On one hand, we've got textbook symptoms that could point to HGH use. On the other hand, we've got doctors going, yeah, no, this isn't what you think. Still, some sports medicine folks and researchers aren't entirely satisfied. They point out that most post-mortem toxicology screenings don't even test for steroids unless someone specifically asks for it. And even then, the window for detecting certain substances, especially after death, is super limited. It's like chasing shadows at that point. And to make things even more complicated, the people trying to detect this stuff are always playing catch-up with the people trying to hide it. There are masking agents, timing strategies, and all sorts of shady little loopholes athletes can use to beat the system. So you kind of get why some people still raise their eyebrows, right? Flo Jo broke records and did it with flair. Those outfits, that hair, those nails. She didn't just run fast, she turned the track into her runway. And some people just couldn't handle that. Her greatness didn't fit into the tiny, safe little box people wanted to put her in. So instead of celebrating her, they started tearing her down, questioning her, doubting her, even in death. And let's not ignore how damaging and exhausting that kind of constant suspicion can be. Imagine spending your life working your butt off, pushing your body to the absolute limit, and achieving something no one else has done before, only to be met with side eyes and whispers. Even when you prove your innocence over and over again, even when your body is no longer here. Isn't that just heartbreaking? At the end of the day, the facts say what they say. No harmful substance was found in her system. She tested clean during her prime. The autopsy didn't definitively point to any banned substances, and still, we have this tug-of-war between fact and suspicion, between what science says and what people feel. It's a messy, emotional debate. And maybe it says more about us than it does about her. Maybe it says something about how hard it is for people to accept brilliance when it comes in a package they didn't expect. So here we are, years later, still going back and forth about Flo Jo. And while the debate might never fully end, one thing is absolutely, unmistakably clear. She was a once-in-a-lifetime talent, a blazing star, a woman who shattered expectations and broke barriers with every single stride. And that can never be questioned. Family and officials urge end to speculation and honor her legacy. When the autopsy results came out, confirming that there were no traces of harmful substance and nothing shady going on, it was like a collective sigh of relief, but also a moment for those who loved and believed in her to speak up loud and clear. Primo Nebbiolo, who was the president of the IAF back then, that's basically the big boss of international track and field, came out swinging. He didn't just defend her, he went off. He said something like, "This report ensures that Florence Griffith Joyner will be able to rest in peace," which honestly felt like a mic drop moment. And he wasn't just talking to fill space, he meant every word. He pointed out how painful and unfair it had been for her family to deal with all the noise, the baseless media reports, the snide comments, all of it. And let's be real, can you imagine being her husband or her daughter and having to listen to that mess when you're already grieving? It's heartbreaking. Nebbiolo didn't stop there either. He straight up called out the media's nonsense, saying those kinds of reckless stories don't just hurt individuals like Flo Jo, they damage the whole sport. Like, think about it. If people believe everyone's cheating, then what's the point of even celebrating athletic greatness, right? He said these campaigns of misinformation make a mockery of the actual anti-doping systems that are in place. Basically, they create this cloud of suspicion that makes it hard for anyone to shine without someone side-eyeing them. And Florence? She shone bright. She wasn't just fast. She was magnetic, unforgettable. She made running look like art. And then there was Prince Alexander de Merode, the guy in charge of the Olympic Committee's medical commission at the time. He also came forward with receipts. He made it crystal clear that Florence had been tested every which way, with the most thorough and intense harmful substance screenings you could imagine. He even said, "We performed all possible and imaginable analyses on her." Like literally, they did everything they could. And guess what? Nothing. Not a single test ever came back positive. Isn't that wild? This woman was hounded with rumors, and yet every single time they tested her, which was often, she passed. Clean. Every time. And de Merode wasn't being vague or wishy-washy about it either. He said there shouldn't be the slightest suspicion. And you know what? He's right. It's honestly so frustrating how a black woman who dominated her sport with such elegance, power, and confidence was constantly doubted. Like, why is it so hard for people to believe that she was just that good? Is it really that unbelievable that she trained hard, pushed herself beyond the limits, and made history without cheating? It's like people couldn't handle the fact that a woman, especially a woman of color, could be the fastest in the world and look fly while doing it. They needed some other explanation because her greatness was just too much for their narrow little boxes. And that's what makes the defense from these high-ranking officials so important. Because sometimes, it's not just about what's true, it's about who's willing to stand up and say it out loud. Her family, too, must have felt vindicated. After all the years of carrying the burden of these baseless accusations, to finally have the truth not only confirmed, but shouted from the rooftops by the people who mattered. That's huge. It's not just about clearing her name, it's about preserving her legacy, her impact, her magic. Florence Griffith Joyner wasn't just an athlete. She was a whole movement. She inspired generations, not just with her speed, but with her confidence, her flair, her unapologetic sense of self. Finally, the whispers got drowned out by the truth. The facts spoke for themselves. And those who knew the real Flo Jo, who ran beside her, tested her, loved her, made sure the world knew too. Because when someone is that iconic, that legendary, you don't let rumors write their story. You speak up, you defend, and most importantly, you remember. How does someone so strong, so young, and so full of life just collapse in her sleep? Florence Griffith Joyner's autopsy report has finally been re-examined, and what's inside is far more unsettling than anyone imagined. Did the doctors miss something? Was there more going on behind the scenes? Stay with us till the very end, because the most shocking part is saved for last. Public figures call for media responsibility. When news broke that Florence Griffith Joyner, Flo Jo, the fastest woman in the world, had passed away so suddenly, it felt like the wind had been knocked out of everyone who ever watched her soar across a track. I mean, how do you even process that someone so full of life, so electric and graceful and unstoppable, could be gone just like that? It didn't feel real. President Bill Clinton put it into words that so many couldn't quite articulate. He and Hillary were shocked and saddened. And he made it clear that this wasn't just a loss for her family or for the U.S. This was a loss for the entire world. Can you imagine the kind of impact someone has to have for a sitting president to say the world has lost something priceless? She wasn't just a track star. She was a global symbol of excellence, a true Olympian in every sense of the word. And let's not forget, she wasn't just breaking records. She was serving as co-chair of the President's Council on Physical Fitness and Sports from 1993 to 1995, giving back in ways that had nothing to do with medals or finish lines. She was helping kids get active, stay healthy, and dream big. Now, of course, anytime someone shines that bright, you know there's going to be critics lurking in the shadows. And that was true for Flo Jo, too. Sports commentator John Feinstein came right out and addressed what so many whispered about back in the day, the harmful substance rumors. He said point blank that the whispers were already swirling back in Seoul in 1988. But here's the thing, she never, not once, tested positive. Not once. Isn't that something? With all the technology, the tests, the scrutiny, all eyes on her, and yet not a single shred of proof. So why were people still so eager to doubt her? Maybe it's because she wasn't just winning, she was dominating. She was smashing records. She was doing things people couldn't wrap their heads around. It's like the moment a woman, especially a black woman, is too good, the world starts asking, how is that possible? Instead of just letting her be great. Even Primo Nebbiolo, the then president of the International Association of Athletics Federations, had to step in and tell the media to chill. Basically, he told reporters to be more responsible in the future, to stop jumping to conclusions and feeding into baseless gossip. Because, let's be honest, once rumors are out there, even if they're completely false, they stick around like a bad smell. People just want something to tarnish a legacy that's brilliant. But you know who wasn't having it? Her husband, Al Joyner. He stood by her like a rock. I mean, can you imagine how hard it must have been to watch the love of your life shatter world records, win Olympic gold, and then hear people downplay it with things like, oh, it was probably wind-assisted, or she must be on something? Al said it best. First they blamed the wind, then the harmful substances. But none of that could erase what she did. Because what she did was undeniable. Florence herself wasn't blind to the whispers. In a 1991 interview, she spoke on it with such calm honesty, it kind of stops you in your tracks. She said she knew she hadn't taken any harmful substance, so she didn't let it get to her. And just like that, you see the heart of who she really was. She wasn't sitting around trying to defend herself to people who were never going to believe her anyway. She knew the truth. And instead of wasting her energy on the critics, she focused on what mattered, giving back. After retiring in 1989, she set up a foundation to help underprivileged children. Like, think about that for a second. After becoming the fastest woman on Earth, her next move was to lift up kids who didn't have the same opportunities. Who does that? Someone with a heart as big as her talent. That's who. So when people talk about Flo Jo, they might start with the records, the medals, the iconic one-legged racing suit, and those unforgettable nails. But the people who really knew her? They talk about the woman who smiled through pressure, who loved her family fiercely, who helped children in need, and who never let the world's doubts dim her light. She was more than a track star. She was a force, a mom, a wife, a fighter, a giver. A legend who knew exactly who she was, even when the world tried to question it. And in the end, that's the kind of legacy that no rumor, no whisper, and no amount of shade can ever take away. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.